With the amount of tomatoes I've thrown at Ubisoft over the last couple of years, I could run Heinz out of business. It is incredibly easy to hate this company, and they make it clear that they deserve it. They are not shy about telling you how much they hate you. They've become infamous for the "you will own nothing and be happy" mentality. They have even point blank said that gamers need to be comfortable not owning their games. This is a company that every step of the way chooses all of the wrong options during the QuickTime events. They are not even accidentally saying things that anyone could appreciate, even the most die-hard Ubisoft Formula fans, if such a creature even exists at this point. They can't even unintentionally say something agreeable. Even as their stock price plummets, fucking death spirals, they somehow dig deeper. This is the equivalent to the captain of a sinking ship turning on all the sink faucets to try and fill it up with even more water as much as possible. I cannot understand it. Today, they've gone on quite the spree here, an entire montage of bad takes from Ubisoft, and I have to make fun of them again. I actually have to. Keep in mind, this company is so misguided. They released multiple NFT games only a year ago. And NFTs are dead and buried, and somehow Ubisoft is still pooping those puppies out. It's crazy how out of touch Ubisoft is. In order to prove that the stupid juice is still flowing deeply at Ubisoft headquarters to this day, let's go ahead and show you their most recent annual financial report where they talk about their microtransactions and how microtransactions are actually a good thing because it allows their players to experience more fun. Very reminiscent of that time EA defended Battlefront controversial decisions by claiming that it was intended to give players a sense of pride and accomplishment. You can catch a slight whiff of that aroma here in the Ubisoft financial report with that statement. And I also can't help but giggle at the first line in their financial report where they try and claim that they're an industry leader in this sector. What a load of fucking barnacles. Get a load of this guy. Maybe at one point in time they were, but these days they are just a public spittoon for people to walk by and hawk loogies on. They are a sad shell of their former self. But this is all public. You can all read it yourself if you want to put your peepers on it. Down here is where you can find this statement: the adoption of monetization and engagement policies that respect the player experience and are sustainable in the long term. At Ubisoft, the golden rule when developing premium games is to allow players to enjoy the game in full without having to spend more. Our monetization offer within premium games makes the player experience more fun by allowing them to personalize their avatars or progress more quickly. However, this is optional. How delusional can you be? It's not even like a good lie. The motivator for these microtransactions that they are ham-fisting into every single game of theirs for the last decade is solely driven by wanting to hose the consumer for more money beyond the initial purchase of the game. Trying to squeeze some more coins out of the piggy banks of the players, hoping that some of the whales will pay to maybe speed progress up like they mention. And while yes, it is optional, there is a little something called pay to win, and it is a very real thing. It's not some make-believe boogeyman. But even in cases where you're offering microtransactions in single-player games, which Ubisoft loves to do, that's not exactly something worth celebrating, because now you're devoting resources into trying to find ways to get more money out of this single-player game, when those resources could have been devoted to just making the game better in the first place, something that Ubisoft seems very against. Their games fall into the same formula and have been for so long now that people are beyond tired of it, and instead of trying to find ways to breathe new life into their titles, they instead try and find new ways of monetizing them through these microtransactions and shit. It's so tone-deaf as well, and it shows very clearly that they don't even see player feedback, because every single Ubisoft game that comes out that is riddled, infected with microtransactions, like every Assassin's Creed now, you find collective sighs from even the most loyal supporters of the franchise. People aren't happy with it. And here they are just completely ignoring it and trying to spin it as a positive thing. Like, oh, it's always optional. Like, it actually like goes over really well because, I mean, it's personalized fun, right? Who wouldn't want to pay for that? Am I right? But another thing that also came out here is Ubisoft's thoughts on the real reason Star Wars Outlaws flopped. They are blaming disinterest in the franchise, which When it was reported that Outlaws was stumbling and not performing all that well, that was cope they used back then as well, like some whispers of it being like, oh, the IP is just not as strong as it once was. Now they're just coming out here with their whole chest saying, no, the reason Outlaws didn't do well is just because no one cares about Star Wars anymore, which is fucking crazy. They are just refusing to take the L and come to terms with the fact that the reason Outlaws didn't do well is it's just not a good game. And it doesn't even have the decency of being like a laughably horrible game where it could be like entertaining in how shitty it is. It is just so boring. It is like the most safe, by the numbers, bland, sterile, Ubisoft, Ubislop game. It is the same generic open world Ubisoft experience that we have seen 1,000 times before, and clearly people are tired of. The only difference with this one is it had a Star Wars skin on it. And also some of the worst stealth you'll find. But outside of the worst stealth you'll find, everything else was just serviceable. And it didn't even try to do anything well. It was just content being mid. And Ubisoft has, for some reason, really struggled with accepting the fact that mid just doesn't really cut it anymore. People don't want more Ubisoft open world games. It's been done a billion times the exact same way every time. It's tired and it's played out, and the sales show that with Star Wars Outlaws. It has nothing to do with the weakening of the IP, which is a real thing. Since going to Disney, it hasn't been as strong. A lot of the Disney shows have been super stinkers, but I think there is more evidence to the contrary that there is a hunger for good Star Wars, as demonstrated by Andor. I can't glaze Andor enough. I think that show is a masterpiece, and I think the reception and the absolute booming success of it speaks for that. People want good Star Wars. They're just not getting it often. Very rarely with something like Andor coming out. Star Wars Outlaws falls into the really uninteresting bucket of Star Wars that people just don't want to play with anymore. They don't want to touch, they don't want to indulge with. But there is still very much a lot of people wanting good Star Wars. It has nothing to do with the IP, with why Star Wars Outlaws flopped. But Goober is still trying to write it off as one of the contributing factors that the game suffered from a number of items. First, it suffered from the fact it was released at a time when the brand that it belonged to, was in a bit of choppy water, and then he acknowledges some technical problems, such as things missing polish, but they were polished and debugged early enough, but it had an effect. Which, again, like, yeah, there were some technical issues, but that is not the main reason that it failed, nor is it the strength of the IP during your release window here. You made basically the exact same copy and paste Ubisoft open world game again. No one wants it. Just accept it and do something different. The final little nugget from Ubisoft today is in regards to them loosely addressing Stop Killing Games, or more so, what they believe Stop Killing Games is about. And it's not the best response, but it's also being misrepresented by some publications with what he was actually saying. So apparently, Ubisoft CEO Goober was asked to respond to the movement at a recent shareholders meeting and said, regarding the petition, we operate in a market. And whenever we release a game, we provide a lot of support for that game. We also provide a lot of services to make sure that the game is accessible and remains playable 24/7. Wow, what saints. How unique. These heroes make sure a game is accessible 24/7, huh? That's never been done before. Holy shit. Crazy concept. Whoa. You mean even on weekends you can play your games? It's so stupid. Ubisoft does the absolute bare fucking minimum. Anyway, though, moving on. Goober says that the company provides information regarding the game and how long the game can be played, though he doesn't go into specifics about how those notices work. The crew, this is speaking in particular about the crew, did have a badge on its front box noting online connection required. You should have known better. You weren't actually buying anything. You were paying to rent. We were giving you a permission slip to play our game for however long we deemed worthy. And the notice in the fine print on the back that Ubisoft may cancel access to one or more specific online features upon a 30-day prior notice. Jumping a bit forward, he says, but this kind of issue is not specific to Ubisoft. All video game publishers are faced with that issue. You provide a service, but nothing is written in stone, and at some point the service may be discontinued. Nothing is eternal. and we are doing our best to make sure that things go well for all players and buyers because obviously support for all games cannot last forever. The article then notes that this is not what Stop Killing Games is trying to do, trying to get perpetual support for the rest of fucking the galactic existence of these games or whatever. That is, again, not at all what it's looking for. Anyway, though, he goes on to say, the lifespan of a piece of software, whenever there's a service component, eventually services may be discontinued, but eventually the software may become obsolete over time. A lot of tools become obsolete 10, 15 years down the line. They're no longer available, and that is why we release a new version. And so we have version 2 and then version 3, but clearly this is a far-reaching issue, and we're working on it. Now, maybe I'm being too charitable in my interpretation here, but from this statement from him, it sounds more like he is identifying that this issue of games ceasing to exist once the development cycle has concluded is an issue that is not exclusive to just Ubisoft, and currently what Ubisoft does is just pull the plug and give players a notice of the impending doom. And he also makes a mention that games can't be supported by the developers forever, and then goes on to talk about how other tools also become obsolete and don't exist forever. It sounds more to me like he's just making a general statement about it, which he's right. The development on a game can't support it forever, which is why it's not what Stop Killing Games is asking for. It is asking for end-of-life plans, so that way when the development cycle is complete and they want to wash their hands of the product, what they do is they would have a plan in place in order for that game to be turned over in some way so that the community that paid for the game can still access the product they paid money for. It can still exist beyond the developer's need to support it. It is not an unreasonable ask. There have been so many game industry veterans with decades worth of experience in the industry coming forward to talk about how important something like that is and how reasonable and feasible it is as well. It is not some ridiculous request or anything. It is very much doable. And what a lot of articles have run with from the Ubisoft statement is when he just made a mention of the support for the game can't last forever. And to me, that wasn't the whole crux of what he was trying to say. And again, maybe I'm being too charitable here to Ubisoft Goober, but with the whole statement, it seems more like he's just identifying it is a far-reaching issue, and it is something that isn't exclusive to Ubisoft, but it is something that he also says that they're working on. It doesn't seem like he was trying to harp on that statement, can't support it forever, as what Stop Killing Games is about. It doesn't really seem like it was targeted and trying to spin Stop Killing Games as that, like I was initially led to believe from the articles that were talking about it. When you see the whole thing, I think it paints a little bit of a different picture. Of course, I'm still no Ubisoft enthusiast here, and of course, Ubisoft isn't exactly happy with this direction, I'm sure, but it doesn't seem like he was trying to misrepresent Stop Killing Games as demanding that we support forever. So, anyway, I still don't love the statement from him, because I still don't love the way they tackle it. I do appreciate that he says they're working on it. I guess we'll see if they actually do. But anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit more about how Ubisoft is going these days, because, yikes, not very good. It doesn't seem all that positive for Ubisoft. And I don't know when they're finally going to have their come to Jesus moment and start making good games again and start making decisions that make sense in the industry. That's really about it. So yeah.